What a great journey we have had this year, despite all the hang-ups and hiccups and the tyranny that's been imposed upon us from outside, which has forced us to go into the catacombs, literally. Maybe not quite as bad yet as in some of the previous periods, but certainly it seems to be going on that way. As I have been saying to you, the Lenten preparation was for us to understand the spiritual life that we would need in order to meet the risen Christ. Now that we have met him with his resurrection, we were given 40 days in which to accumulate that knowledge that is necessary in order that we may go out into the world and proclaim those good tidings to others. Those 40 days, as I mentioned several times to you already, were spent with the Lord and his apostles. Not drinking frappo and eating cakes, but really having a very, very difficult period in understanding everything that they needed to understand in order to make the church work. Because 10 days from the Ascension, the promise of the Holy Spirit was to be given, called Pentecost, which we're celebrating next Sunday, whereby that church then comes down to earth and somebody has to proclaim it throughout the nations. Who? Obviously the apostles. They were the first ones that were given the knowledge on how to operate that church. Everything, as I've always said to you, and you need to remember this, everything that we have comes from those early period, from the catacomb period actually. The way the church is operated, the way the services are run. You know, we have this cycle of services in Orthodoxy: Matins, Vespers, Compline, Midnight Office, the hours. This is not new. This is straight from the synagogues. But of course, they have added the Christian prayers to this. And we continue with that cycle to this day. Every 3 hours, that service is served, is read, especially in monasteries where there are people who can sleep while others are doing it and sort of exchange that time. Yes, there are some parishes that have managed to have the resources to do that as well. And certainly if you go to Orthodox countries, Greece or Russia, Manathos, Serbia, any places like that, Romania, you will see that quite readily amongst the basic parishes, which you don't see here very often. The apostles not only had to know these sort of things, but to be able to stand up to all those nations and their particular beliefs, and to be able to discuss with them the truth about Christianity. When St. Paul came to Athens, for example, he spoke to them a long time on the hill where the Parthenon is. And those Athenians who were renowned throughout the world to be very philosophical and very learned certainly took it in, but also said that your words are very hard to take, your new teaching, and we will want to hear from you at another day. So, you know, these fishermen all of a sudden are able to hold their own with all these great philosophical scholars from places which in those times were like the the Oxfords and the Cambridges of our time, where all the great minds got together and discussed all the wonders in the world and how things worked. The apostles were able to hold their own with that, and not any of them were ever put to shame when asked certain questions, or even tempted by various ways, as perhaps some of you might be when you discuss things with those who are not of the church, but have their particular belief and want to promote that upon us all. During that Pentecost period, which we're coming to next week, the Holy Spirit not only completes the enlightenment of the person's mind, but also opens their mind to be able to speak in different languages. Because obviously if they're going around the world, all the nations of that time, they have to be able to speak in those languages. Otherwise, what are they going to do? Communicate in Greek or Hebrew like they were in Jerusalem? Certainly a lot of that so-called civilized world at that time was Greek, Latin, but not all of it. There was many other types of languages, and they had to understand all those. And the Holy Spirit enlightened them with that. But during these 40 days with the Lord, they got the good dose and the practical dose on how things are to be done. So if anybody to you ever says that Christianity somehow developed through the centuries, you have a good word to say to them. It's not so. There was no development. There was embellishments. We have added millions of saints to the calendars. We haven't developed anything because Christ gave everything that was needed right from day one. It had to be like that. I mean, can you imagine sending these people out without that knowledge? They had to know all the things that were needed to be known. Others will say to you, well, what about the ecumenical councils? Didn't they get together and make all these edicts and whatever? Yes, but they weren't new edicts. There was nothing new in it. What they did was consolidate that which was already known, because heresies arose, wrong teachings, wrong practices, and these had to be trampled on by the truth of Christianity. And the 7 ecumenical councils over the centuries did that. The Holy Fathers tell us that these 7 embrace everything that is needed to sort of put to flight any new wrong understanding or wrong teaching. There's nothing new that they can bring up that can't be sort of extracted from the 7 councils and used to expound the truth. The Holy Fathers also say if there's going to be an 8th, be aware it'll be a robber council. It'll have nothing to do with it. Flee from that, even though there are certain authorities around the world which are asking for this 8th council, but when you look at it, there's really nothing that needs to be discussed in there that can't be already resolved with what we have in the church and what we know. Our obligation from now on, given that we have been given salvation, spiritual life, the church, all the sacraments, all the right teachings, our obligation is to make use of that in our life, because we were given that life to bring forth fruit in the Lord's name. And we should by now be filled to some extent with that knowledge so that we can, to some extent, hold our own also against all the different isms that surround us and different ideas that surround us in the world. And believe me, when you look at it today, although they might sound highfalutin or something like that, they're actually very, very childish. All these new ideas are very childish and very easy to trample upon. If you know a few little things, you can easily put them to flight. So therefore, don't be afraid to stand up for the truth in your life, but use it, because if somebody was sent to you to ask about that, that means God sent him to you, sent him or her to you, and you make that effort. And if you don't know straight away, say a little prayer. Something will happen, and you'll be able to give a few words which will be profitable to that person's soul. Of course, if they don't want to know, if they don't want to hear the truth, they're just not genuine seekers. That's all there is to it. Let them go. They're not genuine. You know, people who are genuine swallow the truth with great joy, no matter what it is, whether it's truths about the natural world or the truths about spiritual life. They run to it because they really need that. But those who are not genuine will always find some way of opposing you one way or another. You've done your bit. That's good enough for them. So, next week on Sunday, which is the 50th day after the resurrection, we have the Pentecost, Penta, 5, being the 50th day after Pascha, the coming down of the Holy Spirit and the establishment of the heavenly church on earth, where all these sorts of things are then contained. It's not an organisation. It's not some sort of building or anything like that, but it's the body of the Lord. And that means a lot of deep things, the body of the Lord, because all our sacraments are contained in that, in the church. Sacraments, you know, the Holy Communion, the baptism, chrismation, ordination, all those sorts of things, which can only come from the original church. You know, it's like some people argue about, no, I won't say it later on. Anyway, God willing will, unless something happens with the tyranny that we're facing right now, we were going to have the liturgy tomorrow, but next week I think we will go for it. We have to aim for the Sunday next week. We can't do it on a Saturday evening on account of kneeling prayers, because it's a very long service, the Pentecostal prayers. After liturgy we have the kneeling prayers, which means it's the first time after Great Lent where we are again able to kneel in church and do all those sorts of things for the benefit of our souls. So please come for that and tell others. I think 10 o'clock will be probably good because of the length of the service to do that. In the meantime, please keep the grace that you do get, and don't forget it is you that is doing the liturgy, not me. It's you. I cannot do the liturgy without people here. The priest by himself cannot. He relies on the people because it's the people's liturgy. It's the people's who bring down the Holy Spirit through the priest in order to sanctify that which is Christ's body and blood.